Welcome to the Workforce, Labor, Economic Development, Finance and Policy Committee here. Happy to call together our first official meeting as now we've got through our work yesterday with some overviews. We're able to, excuse me, able to officially get formed here. We were taking our first minutes and our notes today. Even though we're not passing any legislation this morning, folks, today is an important meeting because it's the first of what our mission, I believe, is this year, is to make sure that businesses testify to us, employees testify to us in what's working in Minnesota and what isn't working for job creators, for employers, for folks that just are concerned about some upcoming mandates and some things that have been passed the last couple of years. That's my focus of the committee as I run the chair this year, and I want to make sure that those comments are always top of mind when it's coming to the work here that we have. Today, our theme, if you want to call it that, is to listen to things kind of surrounding the earned sick and safe time, the paid family medical leave, labor shortages, and anything else that's on the minds of some associations and businesses that have been asked to speak. If we have time later today, members and audience, if anybody else wants to testify, they're welcome to do that. Again, today we don't take any official action. We're not passing anything through. I will set for the note that the committee structures have now been restructured a tiny bit. We've got our DFL members are still not present today. I was hoping that we would see them today after visiting with a few of them yesterday. I was hoping that some of them might want to come. I know some of them are desperately wanting to be here, and I hope that that changes soon. So let's get started. We've got things to do. Members, when it comes to questions today, what I'd like to do is sort of allow our testifiers to have that time so that we allow all of them the time that they want to have to share their concerns with us, whether it's 10, 15 minutes or so. I'm not sure what we have for each testifier, Spencer, but again, let's have our questions kind of come at the end if I could. So if we want to call a certain testifier back to the table, that'd be just fine. So that's kind of my plan today. So if you have a question, our CLA will take your name down so you'll be called back later on. So again, this morning I'd like to welcome the Minnesota Chamber to the testifying table. Ms. Schothorst will be up here then. We've got the Association of Minnesota Counties up next on deck. So everybody, it's great to have everybody here. And Ms. Schothorst, welcome to the committee. And go ahead, start anytime you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Baker, members of the House Workforce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee. My name is Lauren Schothorst, and I'm the Director of Workplace Management and Workforce Development Policy for the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber represents over 6,300 businesses of all types and sizes across the entire state. And we lead the statewide business community to advance responsible public policy that creates jobs, enables commerce, and grows the economy when looking at key factors of GDP and job growth, a strong workforce, and smart public investment. We appreciate the opportunity to share our members' perspectives on the impacts of sick and safe time, paid family and medical leave, and labor shortages on Minnesota's business community. Industries across Minnesota's diverse economy are experiencing several troubling trends, including high costs, steep increases in regulation and business mandates, and business expansion in other states. This has resulted in skepticism among business leaders about the economic future of our state. According to the Minnesota Chamber's 2024 statewide business community survey, the percentage of businesses who say they plan to leave Minnesota is at its highest point since 2019. Lower taxes, better business climate, and the political direction of the state are cited as the top reasons to leave, all up from 2023 levels. Businesses and site selectors alike have described that the overall business climate and hiring issues have led to a trend of expansion of outside of Minnesota in recent years, with Minnesota's high state tax rates, cost of doing business, and lack of workers cited as the top barriers that prevented businesses from expanding in Minnesota. Many businesses specifically have commented on the new sick and safe time and upcoming paid family medical leave mandates. For those who indicated they are choosing to stay in Minnesota, a strong majority of business leaders say it is simply because their business was established here. We must change that narrative and improve our comparative position so that businesses can thrive in Minnesota. As we get to topics specifically within the committee's jurisdiction, it's necessary to establish some of the broader economic context and understand the pressure that our members are feeling. I will share a few key data points from across the Minnesota Chamber Foundation's recent research reports from the past 3 years, which can be found in your packets in their entirety. We hope you will use this economic data to have an honest assessment of the state's headwinds in order to advance policies that will best position our state and business community for economic success. In 2022, the Minnesota Chamber Foundation released Minnesota Entrepreneurship, a Turning Point, which highlighted that the state's complex array of compliance regulations inhibits startup investments and job creation, giving the perception that Minnesota is a high-risk state to hire employees. This report was released prior to the 2023-2024 legislative biennium. In 2024, the Minnesota Chamber's Grow Minnesota program released its report on the state of business retention and expansion in Minnesota. The findings revealed that while Minnesota has increased project activity from the previous year, we still lag behind other states in our region. More worryingly, Minnesota-based companies are investing and expanding in other states at a higher rate than out-of-state companies are expanding or investing in Minnesota, to the tune of a net deficit of $8.4 billion and over 10,000 jobs. In that context, it is noteworthy to point out that this investment went to both blue and red states and to neighboring states that share an actual climate to Minnesota. And finally, on an annual basis, for the last 10 years, the Chamber has released our Business Benchmarks Report to lay out economic indicators in several categories that best determine a healthy economy and a competitive business climate. A few key observations from our 2020-25 report related to GDP and job growth, business costs and regulations, workforce, and public policy for your consideration. First, a strong GDP means an economy is expanding. It reflects increased production, rising incomes, higher consumer spending, expanded business, and increased private sector investment. These elements together can expand the tax base without tax increases and increase the standard of living for citizens. Job growth is another key indicator of economic health as it signals business expansion, improved financial position for individuals, and overall resiliency. Today, however, Minnesota's GDP growth ranks 40th at 1.6%. Job growth ranks 31st at 1.4%. Over the past decade, Minnesota's economy expanded at a slower rate than the U.S. economy, averaging just 1.7% annually in Minnesota compared to 2.4% in the United States. While this differential may not seem stark in the short term, the long-run implications are more significant, leaving future Minnesotans at a relative disadvantage. The recent state budget forecast released by MMB also highlights the impact of slowing our employment growth for our state's current and future stability and success. The cost of doing business can likewise have an impact on numerous elements of a state's economic strength. Business owners cite high costs as the most important issue for elected officials to address. In a recent poll, reducing taxes, bringing down costs, and reducing government spending accounted for 60% of overall responses. Lower business costs enable wage growth, encourage investment, create jobs, and spurs innovation and entrepreneurship. Minnesota's tax rates have hovered in the top 10 nationally for more than a decade. Yet, in 2023 legislative session alone, lawmakers increased taxes by more than $10 billion. Meanwhile, 29 Democrat and Republican states have lowered their tax rates, making Minnesota even more of an outlier. These increases, coupled with increased cost of doing business, discourage growth and impact specific industries disproportionately high, including manufacturers and small businesses. In your packets is a recent article in the Minnesota Star Tribune titled, "As New Laws Take Effect in Minnesota, Small Businesses Say Costs Will Sting," which shares how, as a response to these cost increases, employers are cutting back on hiring, benefits, or services as examples. Looking at the regulatory environment, sensible regulations and requirements on businesses can assure accountability, uphold standards, and protect consumers. But overregulation and rigid one-size-fits-all mandates increase business uncertainty and costs, add compliance burdens, and stifle innovation. Balance is necessary to protect public interest and promote economic growth. In the last 2 years, the number of unfunded, unbalanced mandates placed on businesses have burdened them with increased costs, such as payroll taxes, operational and staffing challenges, such as additional unaccounted for paid time off, the cost of staff time, or hiring new staff entirely to spend on compliance. Small and medium-sized businesses are disproportionately impacted as they have less budgetary flexibility, less HR capacity or expertise, and instead could be focused on growth or investing in their workforce. Employers are already realizing the impact of the escalating number of workplace mandates. Having spent a few weeks on the road visiting businesses across the state recently, the collective response that we've heard is the sick and safe time mandate is being misused by employees, causing legitimate operational challenges and cost impacts across the board. This is largely due to the fact that the mandate is so broad and the rules for requesting notice and documentation are so limited. Looking forward, the paid family and medical leave mandate alone will raise payroll taxes on employees and employers by at least 0.88%, a nearly $2 billion annual tax on Minnesota workers, and will continue to increase administrative burdens, exacerbate staffing shortages, and constrain operations when it is fully implemented in 2026. Employees right now are not looking for their pay to be decreased due to these new higher payroll taxes. Employers are also anxious about how their employees will be treated by the state program as they deal with sensitive personal leave needs. As we shared in 2023, in 2024, and will continue to again this year, our members continue to request reasonable limits on the scope of the paid leave mandates, providing our smallest businesses with some release from the financial and operational impacts of these mandates, ensuring employers have the flexibility to manage around these mandates in ways that are feasible and not cost prohibitive, and mitigating the burdens of onerous new compliance requirements. Shifting to workforce, Minnesota's skilled workforce is often noticed as a key component of our business success. Our labor force participation rate consistently ranks in the top 10 in the nation, but that is a near-term strength, and the data shows concerns for the long term. Although Minnesota benefits from international migration, we have lost domestic migration in recent years. In this year's report, Minnesota is ranked 35th in the nation, with a net loss of nearly 5,000 individuals. Bringing and retaining our workforce is critical for our long-term success. But slow population and labor force growth will constrain job and economic growth over the next decade. Of particular concern for employers already experiencing the effect of this workforce shortage is the onset of these extended paid leave mandates. Finally, public policy plays a role in competitiveness. Minnesota's lawmakers have a responsibility to understand the impact of their decision on employers, employees, and the state's economy. The policies that you support can either stimulate or stifle growth and competitiveness, and will impact how many people live here or will start and grow a business here. We encourage elected officials to build a better understanding of how employers contribute to our economy and the quality of life in Minnesota. Overreaching and one-size-fits-all state mandates disrupt the positive relationship between employers and employees, unnecessarily inhibit creative workplace solutions, and interfere in the operations of workplaces that are already heavily regulated. We oppose ongoing efforts by the legislature to interfere with this dynamic. Instead, we support voluntary or incentivized approaches to compete and retain employees while maintaining safe, respectful, and progressive workplaces. However, as our multitude of reports show, our state is not reaching its economic potential. The Chamber is looking forward to working with members of this committee to retain a strong quality of life by focusing on bipartisan solutions to grow our economy, such as lowering costs for businesses and families, setting a balanced and sustainable state budget, enacting policies to encourage private sector investment and innovation in Minnesota, adjusting uncompetitive new laws, and reducing workforce barriers and other cost burdens undermining growth. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information with the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Schotthorst. And again, members will allow questions maybe at the end, and I know Lauren will be around for a further question, so thank you very, very much. Mr. Hilgert, if you would come forward, as well as Owen Worth. I think you guys are presenting together, so good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Workforce Labor Committee, and it's great to have you here today. When you're ready, proceed. Introduce yourselves for the record and proceed.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. My name is Matt Hilgart. I work for the Association of Minnesota Counties. The Association of Minnesota Counties represents all of Minnesota's 87 county governments in the state. I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk more today about the impact of two significant employment laws on local government. And I think the discussion is very timely given where we find ourselves with ESST and paid leave implementation, and for the mere fact that these programs can have both a direct effect on government services that our communities rely on, as well as the costs of these services which residents pay for by way of property taxes, a topic which I'm all sure you're very familiar with coming from the holiday season when we had our Truth in Taxation hearings. On this topic, it is an important reminder that for county operations, our main driving costs are labor, that is, people. County employees deliver critical services, often as mandated by the state, and we are proud to invest in our workforce. We believe we have a duty to not only take care of the civil servants who take care of us all, but also prudently manage the costs, as we know the people who finance government, i.e. the taxpayer, are not a limitless pool of resources and have an expectation that government remain an efficient and strong steward of taxpayer dollars. As members are all well aware, county governments across the state engage in collective bargaining to create and make changes to any of our employee benefit structures. Counties and unions meet, confer and negotiate over salary, potential bonuses, general wage increases, paid time off, vacation, sick leave, health insurance, retirement benefits, education and professional training development opportunities, clothing allowance for certain public work officials like snowplow drivers, mental health supports for certain high-stress jobs, and even child care. These benefit structures are unique and look different in every county, and while there are similar themes and interests that exist among all workers, each county employee group has a specific and unique need for their members. Of course, the two programs we are focusing on today, paid leave and earned sick and safe time, were created and mandated outside the collective bargaining process, without respect or deference to decades worth of publicly funded, collectively bargained benefit systems across the state. And what that means at a very high level is that these new benefits, access to 48 hours of earned sick and safe time with broad leave categories, and up to a total of 20 weeks of paid leave for various medical, family, exigency, and bonding-related purposes are added to our current employee benefit systems, irrespective of their duplicative nature, confusing interactions with our current benefit systems that have been developed over negotiations with span generations, or their costs, which I should note represent costs to both employer and employees, some of whom may question why they're responsible for paying a statewide benefit that they might have already access to within their benefit structure. So for example, an employee who has accumulated over 1,500 hours of sick leave in St. Louis County for the direct purposes of what the new paid leave law was created for is not required to use one single hour of that bank for the medical leave period. In short, the new mandates give no recognition of the generous benefits public employers have been providing, or, and this is equally important, require a utilization of them, or allow us to change the past benefits that might be redundant in this new system. This all highlights a core difference for all public employers, and that is that we do not have the unilateral authority or ability to change our collectively bargained paid leave plans without the input and agreement of employee representative groups. For practical purposes, that means a government unit typically has to offer something, wages, benefits, etc., to make changes to these plans. As you can infer, these offerings may not only increase the cost of government, which is paid for via taxes, but also potentially accumulate to longer periods of absence, which it is reasonable to infer may impact county operations of mandated critical services. Aside from these fundamental concerns, local government groups have been working together to identify some practical items we'd like to see addressed this session in respect to both paid family leave and earned sick and safe time. In some cases, these concerns have been identified in prior sessions, but the changes made either not completely solve the issue or created new issues. And I hope you don't mind if I go through a few of these quickly. The first is the paid family leave premium allocation. While the law is clear on the intent for employers to pay at least 50% of the total premium costs, the way it is written leaves it unintentionally vague for purposes on how to fund the other 50%. Without further clarifying this language, we are subjecting local governments to potential demands to collectively bargain, participate in interest arbitrations, or other legal disputes just to exercise the ability to require reimbursement of 50% of the premium like all other employers. Again, the irony here is that we are being forced to potentially bargain for the ability to only pay 50% of the premium for a new benefit that was mandated on us outside the collective bargaining process. The difference between paying 0.44% of a premium and 0.88% of a payroll tax could be hundreds of thousands of dollars for smaller communities, which might not sound like a lot, but $100,000 could be 1% of a levy in a smaller community, or several million dollars. Equally, it is important. We asked the legislature to change the law to be written so that employers and employees each pay 50% of the premium with an ability, but not a requirement, for employees to negotiate or choose to pay more. Number two is the treatment of elected officials. This is pretty clear cut. In earned sick and safe time, it is clear that county elected officials are not qualified to be recipients. We would ask that that same language is applied to paid family leave. The third is recognition of certain unique functions in the paid leave program. For example, counties employ thousands of election officials and judges across the state on a very short-term basis, in some cases 2 days for the entire year, 1 day for training, 1 day for the election itself. We request that these officials are not included in paid family leave premium collection or program eligibility when these individuals are expected to work 1 to 2 days in most cases every other year or once a year. 4 is a clearer understanding of the paid leave options for private plan alternatives and viability, along with plan exemptions and the timeline for D to make these decisions. Many counties have similar, or I would argue in some cases more generous, benefit programs than the paid leave plan, but may find seeking an exemption all but impossible because the qualification list for exempted plan status spans 70 different categories. Does a county family leave plan that provides 10 weeks of 100% salary replacement for bonding and parental leave, which is arguably more beneficial than the state's plan, which is only up to 60% of salary reimbursement, does that qualify for an exemption? Do we need to meet all 70 categories to be exempt? If counties submit an exemption request in July or August, will there be a guaranteed response time frame so that we can appropriately budget for any considerations prior to our preliminary levy and final levy setting? Likewise, will there be a viable private market alternative? These are all questions that will be relevant both during the rulemaking process and may be assisted this year with legislative action. Number 5, a clear intent for employees to coordinate with employers on paid leave, intermittent leave schedules. This law and extended leave period will require the ability to backfill or hire replacement workers to fulfill public work which may be essential or mandated functions from the state. In the event that the leave is intermittent, we believe it's fair to require employees to make best efforts to accommodate existing workplace schedules so that we can minimize business and service disruptions. And the last two are regarding earned sick and safe time, and I know my colleague, Mr. Worth, will be talking a little bit about this as well. The first is that we do not believe it's fair to superimpose the new permissible leave standards for the new hours of mandated earned sick and safe time onto the hours that have already been provided prior to ESST and the hours that will accrue beyond earned sick and safe time, 48 hours a year. And lastly, we are concerned with the requirement that public employers have to negotiate with certain critical essential employees to require them to come to work under weather-related events. We are appreciative that in 2024 the legislature did attempt to make some changes to this, recognizing that we still have a core function of having telecommunicators answer the calls for dispatch. People operate our jails, child protection workers still manage caseloads, etc. But the language that was put into law still doesn't provide the clarity that we're seeking and requires a memorandum of understanding before we can actually require that. So again here, we're collectively bargaining potentially or providing a new benefit to ask folks to have the power as employers to require people to come in during those events. That is my list, and I really do appreciate the extended time that you provided to go through some of these. I do want to provide a note of gratitude to the county HR directors and administrators throughout the state, from Meeker and McLeod, Candy Ojai, and Fillmore, all the way up to St. Louis County, Stearns County, Hennepin, and Ramsey for the collection of kind of unanimous issues that they would like to see addressed or have concerns about. And Mr. Chair, as the session continues, we are very much looking forward to working with the entire legislature to enact some of these, what we would consider very reasonable changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hilgard, very much. And I appreciate bringing the voice, a clear voice today from really all counties around the state of Minnesota. So this is perfect timing. We've got, excuse me, some time to work on this, but thank you very much for your testimony this morning. Mr. Worth, welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Chair Baker and members. My name is Owen Worth. I'm with the League of Minnesota Cities, an organization that represents the collective interests of 841 cities across the state of Minnesota. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today to provide the perspective of cities as public employers on the new leave programs enacted over the past 2 years. Because my colleague, Mr. Hilgert, so well captured many of the big picture realities that public employers are grappling with as it relates to the new programs, I'm going to begin with what we are hearing from individual cities as they have been working to implement the Earn Sick and Save Time and Minnesota paid leave laws since their passage, and then I'll move on to changes that the League would support being made to these mandates. As an organization, one of the areas that the League offers support to our members is through consultation to city human resource administrators, city clerks, city staff, and since the passage of ESST and the paid leave laws, we have been fielding calls from cities on the new leave programs and have encountered a number of recurring questions about them. At a high level, city staff have reported struggling to concurrently implement 2 new leave programs that differ slightly from the leave policies that have already been offered to or collectively bargained with city employees. For most cities, these mandates are in addition to existing generous leave policies they already offer in order to be seen as employers of choice, particularly in a climate where many employers struggle to recruit and retain qualified employees. The creation of the 2 new leave mandates has left cities navigating a complicated network of leave policies for our public employees. There has also been concern regarding the potential stacking of various leave programs enacted at both the state and federal level, and this could result in cities having to be more cautious with changes to their leave policies moving forward as they face potential budget constraints and seek to responsibly invest taxpayer dollars to perform vital city services. Consistent with what the counties are experiencing, cities have also expressed concerns about ESST's impact on the core essential services provided by emergency personnel. Along with requiring that ESST protections during a weather event be negotiated with certain emergency personnel, the state mandates also limited employers' ability to monitor an employee's use of paid leave. This is particularly burdensome when cities need to depend on personnel to be ready and available to provide core essential services and respond to emergencies. Cities have also many questions about the Minnesota paid leave program's option of opting into a private plan. Uncertainty among cities remains around which employers will qualify and what the timeline will be for employers to receive approval from the Department of Employment and Economic Development, especially as we move closer to that January 2026 effective date. In addition to these concerns we're hearing from cities, I would also like to share the changes to these programs the League's Board of Directors has endorsed as part of our policy committee process. The first being Earn Sick and Save Time's effect on more generous leave policies. As Mr. Hilgert mentioned, changes passed last year expanded ESST's protections to an employee's previously accumulated sick leave bank. As I stated earlier, many cities have prided themselves on being an employer of choice by providing generous leave policies to their employees, which in many cases were previously bargained for in good faith based on legal requirements at that time. The League would be supportive of legislative efforts that would seek to honor the terms of those previously bargained sick bank hours and to not be superseded by state mandates. Second would be an exemption for positions that are a non-traditional employer-employee relationship. Many cities have numerous unelected or appointed committee or commission members that do not fit within a traditional employer-employee relationship and are paid on a meeting-by-meeting basis. The League supports amending Earn Sick and Save Time statute to incorporate a definition of public employee that would not include these positions within the program. Third would be exempting elected officials similar to the counties in the Minnesota paid leave program. As some of you may recall, in 2024, the legislature amended ESST statute so that elected officials were exempted from qualifying for Earn Sick and Save Time. The League supports similar legislation that would exempt those individuals from the Minnesota paid leave program as well. Fourth is the critical essential personnel. The League shares the concerns expressed by the counties on Earn Sick and Save Time, especially when it relates to our core essential personnel, and particularly when it comes to collectively bargaining the use of ESST during a weather event. I would add that there is also the concern about the limits the law places on public employers' ability to monitor an employee's use of paid leave when, again, which is again particularly burdensome on cities as they need to depend on personnel to be ready and available to provide core essential public services and respond to emergencies. Fifth and lastly is regarding the 50-50 premium split within the Minnesota paid leave program. I would emphasize what Mr. Hilgert said about the paid leave premium split and add that the league is supportive of any efforts to maintain and preserve local decision-making authority when it comes to its leave policies. While cities and other public employers are responsible for a minimum of 50% of the premium within the paid leave program, there is confusion as to whether a statute dictates the premium is a split. Premium split is a mandatory subject of bargaining, or if public employers retain the premium split as an inherent managerial right. We seek clarification on this subject moving forward. Chair Baker and members, that concludes my remarks, and I once again thank you for your time and allowing me to provide the perspective of cities on the leave programs.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your testimony today, and I'm glad you're going to stick around for any further questions. I think that we'll have some for
Absolutely.
you. Next up, the Minnesota Association of Townships. I'd like to welcome John to the table.
Good morning,
Bessie,
Mr. Chair.
good morning. Welcome. Go ahead.
Yep. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to give our feedback on this important matter. The Minnesota Association of Townships represents nearly all of Minnesota's 1,776 townships. For those of you who are from more built-up districts, townships are a particularly strange beast when it comes to public employers. For the most part, we are similarly situated to our colleagues at the cities and the counties. However, it's not unusual for us to have no employees whatsoever. It's not unusual for us to have no facilities whatsoever. It's not even unusual for us not to have any actual internet access at town halls or something like this. Now, that means in practice that township supervisors, the elected officials themselves, are often the ones who are doing the physical work. So if there's a tree that falls on the road, we're the guys who go out and chainsaw it off. We're the guys who are running the grader. We're the guys who are running the plow sometimes. Now, in particular, with respect to paid leave, and I would echo the comments of Mr. Hilgert and Mr. Worth, we are similarly situated in most respects. But in particular with paid leave, a pain point that I am seeing with our members is the failure to include an exemption for elected officials. This has put us in something of an anomalous position because it is the people who are doing the work themselves who are also setting their own schedules and by statute also have the right to set their own compensation. So to the extent that that they wanted paid leave, they were already granted that by statute effectively. However, given our particularly unusual position with respect to administrative lift capacity, often we don't have town halls, often we don't have any real record-keeping capacity. The additional reporting and record-keeping requirements in paid leave puts us in that is a not inconsiderable burden for benefits that don't actually apply to us in any meaningful sense. Our members still can be fired by their voters if the voters decide that they don't like the amount of time that they're taking off. But to the extent that they want to take off time, they have the power to do that. So they can't actually benefit from this program, and they have to engage into some particularly for them burdensome reporting requirements. Now, unfortunately, I think this was probably not the original intention, but given the language in the future, so 268 Cap B 0117, it appears to me that the stronger interpretation of the language at present is that elected officials count, given the legislature's intentional inclusion of exemptions in 1819445 subdivision 5 and similar language in 268.035 subdivision 20. Therefore, we would support, along with the changes that our colleagues propose, we would just sort of foot stomp a little bit the idea that elected officials probably should not count. That particular provision is unusually burdensome for us. So thank you for allowing me to give my comments here. Appreciate the opportunity. And
Mr. Berg-Moberg, thank you for that. And again, my apologies for the earlier missing your name here. I've got it wrong on my calendar here, but thank you. Townships are very unique, and it is something that a lot of folks don't understand how that really does work. Not knowing many of them don't even have employees. Sometimes I didn't realize the supervisors actually get in the trucks, grab the chainsaws, and keep their communities open. So that's good to know. Thank you very much. for your testimony today. Now, Mr. Beshi will come forward now with the NFIB. John, good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair Baker and members of the House Workforce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee. My name is John Beshi, and I am the State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business in Minnesota. NFIB represents over 10,000 small businesses located in every corner of Minnesota. Our members vary in size, but our average member has 10 employees or less. Our mission is to promote and protect the right of our members to own, operate, and grow their businesses. I want to start by thanking you all for the opportunity to provide a perspective on some of the challenges that small businesses throughout the state face. These challenges need to be taken seriously by policymakers because small business is the backbone of our state's economy with 1.2 million employees and over $63 billion in payroll. Minnesota's small businesses are under tremendous amounts of pressure due to high tax rates, costly employment mandates, and workforce shortage issues. Over the last 2 years, small businesses have been subject to numerous new employment mandates that increase costs and pose various operational issues. Before I touch on the paid family and medical leave mandate and the earned sick and safe time mandate, I'd like to provide some context regarding ongoing workforce shortage issues. Finding qualified workers remains a significant challenge for small businesses throughout the state. In fact, recent NFIB data indicates that labor quality is among the most important problems that NFIB members currently face in operating their businesses. For instance, in December of 2024, of the 55% of members who reported hiring or trying to hire, 89% reported few or no qualified applicants for the positions that they were trying to fill, and 35% reported job openings that they could not fill. It's important to highlight these numbers because unfunded mandates such as the earned sick and safe time and the soon-to-be in effect paid family and medical leave mandate directly contribute to these workforce shortage concerns. NFIB was and remains opposed to the creation of a state-run paid family medical leave program because of the immense cost and operational burden that it will impose on small businesses. Seeking replacement workers for up to 20 weeks per year poses unique challenges for many small employers who must fulfill orders and meet contractual obligations to stay afloat. Small employers face increased recruitment, training, and or overtime costs if they can even find an internal or external replacement at all. The broad definition of family member also furthers concerns that the utilization of the program will be higher than anticipated. In addition, NFIB members remain very concerned with the uncertainty surrounding various compliance and administrative burdens that will be associated with the program. Most small businesses lack the layers of management that handle administrative and compliance obligations that larger companies have. Many do not have an HR department or accountant, and small employers are regularly involved in both the administration and operations of the business on a day-to-day basis. Finally, there is real concern that the payroll tax to fund the program will continue to increase from year to year to accommodate program growth. In fact, the payroll tax has already increased from the initial 0.7% to the 0.88% before the program is even live, resulting in higher costs already for both employers and employees. And some small businesses are extremely concerned that this mandate, which is unprecedented in cost and scope, will soon be in effect and continue to request changes that rein in the scope and cost of the program and provide additional flexibility for small businesses. NFIB also opposed and remains opposed to the recently enacted earned sick and safe time mandate. Many of the concerns that our members have with the paid family and medical leave mandate also apply to the ESST. The earned sick and safe time requirement places an unfunded mandate on our state's smallest businesses at a time when many can least afford it. Small businesses often operate on increasingly thin margins and vanishing bottom lines, and labor costs can often be the single most important problem for many small business owners. Small businesses work hard to take care of their employees, but the one-size-fits-all nature of this mandate has placed a heavy burden on these employers, and our members continue to request common-sense steps to reduce the costs and make the mandate more workable for small businesses. Although it's outside the scope of this meeting, it's also prudent to point out that on top of all these new employment mandates, there's been a lack of any meaningful tax relief for small businesses. Rather, businesses have recently been hit with additional taxes, such as a 5% additional assessment on their unemployment insurance taxes, and of course, the forthcoming payroll tax to help fund the paid family and medical leave program. The net impact of high taxes and costly employment mandates results in an environment in which small businesses are forced to raise prices or refrain from making additional investments in their business to help absorb these costs. This negatively impacts competition and ultimately impedes economic growth. If lawmakers want a successful and competitive economy, they must oppose new employment mandates, tax increases on small businesses, and regulations that increase costs or attempt to micromanage the employer-employee relationship. They must also take an honest look at some of the recently passed employment mandates and be sensitive and receptive to the concerns of small businesses throughout the state. In closing, I want to thank you all again for the opportunity to provide our comments on today's topics, and we look forward to working with the members of this committee to further address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sticking around, too, for further questions. Mr. Vesey, thank you. Next up is Gavin Hansen, Minnesota Business Partnership. Welcome, Gavin, and please proceed to the committee.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Good morning, Chair Baker, committee members, and staff. My name is Gavin Hansen, and I'm the Fiscal and Economic Policy Director for the Minnesota Business Partnership. Our organization represents over 100 business leaders and executives who collectively employ nearly 500,000 Minnesotans across a diverse range of industries, forming a vital part of America's headquarters economy. First, I want to express my gratitude to Chair Baker and this committee for providing us an opportunity to discuss some critical issues today. My remarks will focus on Minnesota's new paid leave program. The members of the Minnesota Business Partnership, many of whom lead some of our state's most iconic companies, have been offering paid leave benefits to their employees for years. They didn't do this because it was a mandate by the government. They did it because it was the right thing to do for their employees. Offering paid leave has also been essential for attracting and retaining top talent, both in Minnesota and nationwide. Several MBP members have become national leaders in employee benefits, setting benchmarks that other companies across the country aspire to follow. However, over the past 2 years, it might not seem evident that Minnesota is home to such a wealth of expertise in paid leave within the private sector. During legislative discussions about the state's paid leave program, our subject matter experts, individuals who have successfully implemented similar programs in states like Washington and Oregon, offered insights and recommendations. Yet many of their concerns and suggestions were not incorporated into the final legislation, even when they aligned with the goals articulated during the legislative process. MBP members are deeply committed to administrating benefits directly for their employees. Managing these benefits internally allows companies to tailor solutions to employee needs, maintain flexibility, and preserve the critical relationship between employees and HR departments. At significant moments in an employee's life, they should be able to turn to a trusted HR professional, not navigate a state-run system that might feel impersonal like a DMV hotline. Yet some advocates for the state-run program struggle to understand why businesses would prefer this direct approach over opting into the state plan. Where we stand. With implementation less than a year away, MBP members are working diligently to evaluate their employees' needs, analyze the new state law, and decide between offering private plans or opting into the state plan. While some members, having navigated similar transitions in other states, are further along, many others are grappling with the complex process for the first time. Despite engaging in constructive conversations with DEED staff and sharing serious concerns about implementation, progress has been slow and limited. Many critical questions remain unanswered, and technical adjustments to the law, essential for smooth implementation, have yet to be made. There is still time to get this right, whether it involves delaying implementation to allow business adequate time to prepare and test the state system, or make sensible adjustments to key definitions and benefit durations based on successful models from other states. We must prioritize getting this program right. A poorly executed rollout, reminiscent of challenges with MNLARS or MNsure, could lead to significant disruptions for employees and undermine public confidence. In a legislative session marked by an evenly divided government, the Minnesota Business Partnership urges leaders to work together and ensure this program is as effective as possible for both employers and employees. By prioritizing collaboration and pragmatism, we can create a system that works for all Minnesotans. Thank you for your time and attention, and I look forward to answering any questions you guys might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen, very much for coming. Ms. Zinn from Hospitality, Minnesota, would you please come forward? She's our final testifier that we have on the calendar today to members of the public. If there's anybody else that would like to testify for a couple minutes, please let us know. Raise your hand, and then we'll put you on the list. So thank you very much, and welcome, Hannah.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself and proceed with Hospitality Minnesota's thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Baker and committee members. My name is Hannah Zinn, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for Hospitality Minnesota. We represent Minnesota's restaurant, food service, hotels, lodging, resorts, campground sectors, and more. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on economic impacts of earned sick and safe time, paid family medical leave, and labor shortages on the hospitality industry. In Minnesota, the hospitality industry employs over 350,000 employees, averaging about 12% of the state's total workforce. Our members are businesses of varying sizes, business models, and economic impacts. The industry itself contributes $2.3 billion in annual tax revenue to the state and more than $8.1 billion in total labor income. While we believe the goal of providing the best possible benefits to all workers, including safe and sick time and paid family medical leave, is laudable, a one-size-fits-all approach does not work for our small business operators. We believe that allowing businesses to keep flexibility in providing benefits to employees is critical given the operational differences in varying hospitality businesses. Examples of these differences include entities that have sharp seasonal peaks and make extensive use of part-time, seasonal, and international workers, businesses who employ high school and college-age students working part-time. They also employ adults full-time to support themselves and adults working 1 or 2 shifts per week to earn extra income. It is customary practice for hospitality employees to trade shifts when an illness or other reason keeps them from working their scheduled shift, and most employers have standard protocols and best practices in place to appropriately address worker illness situations and the need for flexibility to staff their operations on short notice. In conversations with our members, they noted that they have not felt the true economic consequences of these policies yet. However, now that a year has passed since earned sick and safe time implementation, allowing for hours to be accrued and rolled over, we are watching this very closely. A consequence of these and other one-size-fits-all policies are the unintended inequities created between hourly and salaried employees. Previously, earned sick and safe time and paid family medical leave were tools available to employers to recruit and retain the best employees. Minnesota is an outlier in so many ways. We're one of 7 states without the tip credit and one of 4 states that does not allow tip pooling. Our members would also like to note employees are not taking advantage of these new benefits. Employers have paid out remaining balances to employees or are seeing their employees banking these hours. The notice of intent to take leave is critical to the hospitality industry. Customary practice in the industry is employees relying on each other to trade shifts when an illness or emergency comes up. But with paid family medical leave removing the employer from the conversation and no clear guidance in these rules, employers worry an already tight labor market will create more chaos and exacerbate staffing shortages. For example, this may require employers to change other employees' schedules, canceling vacation or approved time off for other employees, retaining temporary or substitute employees, or canceling events or closing operations, all of which requires significant time and planning, as it affects the work, schedules, and lives of coworkers, managers, customers, and visiting public, many of whom have already made plans based on the expectation of availability. In addition, the current 150-day language for seasonal employees should be changed to 180 days to make this provision consistent with the definition of a seasonal employer. Otherwise, this 30-day gap between the definition of seasonal employers and the definition of seasonal employees does not advance the intent of the statute to protect seasonal employers and will leave seasonal employers understaffed for 30 days each calendar year. This is an inconsistency in the statute that will require legislative change. As abuse of these programs is a high concern for employers, intermittent leave absences should be confirmed by the employer prior to payment by the commissioner to avoid double dipping and a need for the commissioner to collect overpayments from the employee. Intermittent leave absences should be confirmed by the employer consistent with the employer's regular payroll schedule. Thank you for the time to speak today about these important policies. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
And thank you, Ms. Sin. I do have a couple questions right off the bat because I want to make sure members understand the difference in the restaurant world of tip pooling and tip credit. Would you please explain that to folks
Absolutely.
about what the difference is and how that works?
So tip pooling across the states is where an employer can designate that all tips received by employees, by front of house staff, are shared across all front of house staff. The tip credit in itself, I am blanking on that. I'm so sorry. I believe you know about that, though.
Well, I do.
Yes.
But again, the tip credit, and again, it's some folks call it a penalty, but again, the tip credit has in years been, in fact, we're not giving credits to the employer for the wages that are made in a tip setting as well. So if you are making under the minimum wage, we were always wanting to make sure that we were given credit for the money that was given by patrons, which well exceeds in many cases, the minimum wage. So again, in Minnesota, unlike a lot of our neighboring states, they actually pay under the regular minimum wage because they wouldn't work for those low wages. But because of the tips, that typically has showed many times in my restaurant operations or whatever that would double or triple your hourly rate on an average basis. So I just want to make sure that that's what that is, and Minnesota does not recognize tips as income. They do when it comes to payroll taxes. They do take the taxes, but it's an important fact of this too. And even getting back to a little bit of a tip pooling thing. Again, as a former restaurant owner, and know this a lot, when employees get tips at a table, they can voluntarily share their tips with a bartender, a bar back, a kitchen employee if they want to as a group, but the owners or the managers cannot be involved in those kind of sharing of tips. Again, that might be different in some other states. I know in Minnesota, as an owner, we couldn't touch that, but we would highly encourage that to happen because it's one team that makes everything work. You can't have a good tip if you don't have good food coming out of the kitchen in a timely fashion. So again, it's complicated, but it's important to recognize that. And again, as we've heard this morning, members and to the audiences and the public, this is a complex world that we live in when it comes to employment. Whether you're a 24-hour operation and you're having a hotel or nursing homes, or where you have sharply seasonal stuff like we've heard just today in the hospitality industry, the public employees realm that we were, shared with the townships, the counties, and the cities, they've had negotiated benefits already in place. So our role this year is going to be to understand what groups really should be dove into. We need to take a scalpel to the program to make sure that this will work for as many, but not overtax and take taxes from people that already are getting these great benefits, and even to the large employers that Mr. Hansen brought forward. They were visionaries. They knew that they had the ability to offer these good programs to a lot of their employees. 28% of Minnesotan employees had already been getting some form of a paid parental leave or a paid medical leave. And so with the one-size-fits-all bill that was passed last couple years in the last session, and I'll remind everybody too that it was passed in a bipartisan fashion opposed to these things because we had members from the Democrats opposed it too. Not a single Republican voted for this. And when you have hyper-partisan bills that are this massive and this kind of policy that moves forward, it makes this year really critical for us to get this right, to get it right-sized. And so I just wanted to share that. Thank you, Ms. Zinn, for coming in. And again, I welcome any questions from the members at this point. I'll ask finally if there's any other members from the public that would like to comment on anything regarding workforce issues, jobs, vacancies. I want you to feel like we've got some time right now this morning. As we start moving forward with this committee, we may not have this extra time, and I don't expect anybody just to jump up with this, but if anybody wants to stop in, that'd be great. I don't believe anybody is here from the Department of Economic Development or the Department of Labor. I think, again, as I mentioned yesterday, they are not coming to these meetings until they know that this has been set up in their way that they say is official. We have determined certainly yesterday and today, we have this quorum today. 7 in this workforce committee now is a quorum. because we have reassigned it. The Speaker of the House has rechanged things, and again, we highly encourage our other colleagues to come to work so we can all share ideas and thoughts about how can we help employers. That is the bedrock of what Minnesota works on, the economic engine that we need. You know, we heard this last night from Governor Walz. This is an important thing that we have to dive into. And it doesn't work the way it should. Like in a dreamland, that's what they wanted to do. But there are specific reasons why we need to dive into this. And we heard this morning compelling evidence why we need to dive into this. And members, this is our goal this year, is to understand the complexity of this, to look at ideas about what we can bring forward that will get bipartisan support to move forward. We aren't going to pass these bills alone, but we can do it as a group, and we need to make sure we remember that. And so I just want to say that. Members, again, I don't see anybody else from the public that wants to come forward, and I want to thank anybody, and we got a nice audience here today, so thank you for being here. Members, I'll open it up for any questions. For any final thoughts, any overviews. This is, you know, we got enough time here, so please feel free to chime in. Anybody yet? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the presenters today. We heard today the same thing that we are hearing, going, as you had mentioned, going out in the community to all levels. I have not found anybody that has said this is something that we should move forward with in the current, the way it's currently written. As a small employer, I'm very concerned, especially with what I'm seeing already out in the marketplace. I believe this moving forward the way it is, without the recognition that one size does not fit all, that it is going to kill innovation. It's gonna make people not want to start bringing on employees. They're going to stay at one person. They're going to stay under the radar. And the reason we want people to grow to bring on employees so they can start earning the paid time off, the vacation time off, the sick time, the health insurance, stuff like that. This is going to start. That's going to hurt that. And one of the ways it's doing it is I've seen people are getting prepared already. Is in the HVAC industry, in the plumbing industry, in the trades. There is a huge move right now of smaller companies, mom and pop companies, that are selling to private equity companies. Now, these private equity companies are not part of Minnesota. They're from out east, they're out from out west. And what that is turning is people into numbers. And I've seen it already because people have been coming to look for work with me, leaving the industry, telling us what's going on. And when these companies that are under 50, and most of the trade companies are under a 50 or 100 and under 50, and they are now saying we can't do this anymore. We have our spouse doing the book work. We're running very lean, and all of a sudden they're saying we're done. We're just going to sell out. We're going to move to somewhere else, and that's going to raise costs. I've already seen it. If you eliminate the people and competitiveness, if there's fewer people coming out to replace your furnace, if there's less people to do service work, the prices are going up significantly. So that's a price increase, so that's going to hit people. I really believe we need to get back to the belief that and the desire to get people started in a business, achieve their dream, hire new employees, they come on, and then they create jobs. They learn what it's about, and they create jobs. We're eliminating that because just people are going to sit at one person, one truck, as they say, one van, or figure out a way how to subcontract, or figure out something how to do that. It's going to affect property taxes, and so that's going to affect us. We heard that from the counties. That's going to raise the cost on everybody. And I'm concerned about plans and programs that in their attempt, and I see this with affordable housing, in their attempt to solve a problem, they increase the problem. They increase the cost and they create more harm, and then what happens? You have to create another program, and you have to create more program. So I just don't like that. One of I'm concerned with the safety. You know, we're talking about corrections departments, we're talking about police departments, we're talking about coverage. You know, when I am part of the Washington County Reserve Sheriff's Reserves, and recent meeting we had was they are really having difficulty finding police officers. I mean, really having problems, you know, and this is even at the corrections level. We've kind of seen examples from, I believe, Hennepin County of not having enough correction officers and what that can hurt counties and sheriff's departments. So that's very concerning that we don't have something like that. I am concerned also the fraud part of this, that somebody has a private plan and then they also take advantage of the, you know, if they have a private plan already, they have, or the company provides that, and then all of a sudden they also get paid out by the state plan. And then all of a sudden it just says the overpayments, the commissioner must calculate overpayments and notify the individual in writing. I think we've seen enough programs where we've tried to get money back and it never happens. It also has things about out-of-state people, out-of-state employers and stuff. So I'm concerned we're going down a bad direction without that. So those are the biggest things, but it just really boils down to is we are creating a bigger problem and we're taking away jobs from people. We're taking away opportunity for people. And we just need to go back to recognizing that, you know, and the federal government has recognized this, that there's a difference between mom and pop starting to start their dream and some multinational big company with the infrastructure, the overhead, and everything like that. When you're small, overhead is key. That can kill you or you can succeed. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Members, as we also kind of get used to our room here, when you speak, turn your switch on, and then also let's pull the microphone a little closer. I think it's easier to hear you in the room that way, so we get that. I think I'm very aware that I want everybody to hear our voice this year. So this is all part of the theme, right? Representative Mueller, did you have a question? I wasn't sure. You good? Okay, thank you. Wasn't sure if you had a question. Oh, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Chair Baker. I think that as I'm listening to this, I being new to the Labor Committee, hearing from as I visit all of my towns and cities and townships, and I'm one of the rural areas, the township. Thank you so much for talking about townships reality. I mean, I've gone to several of my township meetings and listening to them talk about how they even have to contract for, you know, first responder services and the amount of money that it takes for that. I mean, this type of expansive mandate touches places that I don't think people understand. I think the idea of having, you know, mandated paid family leave is one of those things where people are like, yeah, of course. But when it gets down to the nuts and bolts, I think it's something that people don't really understand how expansive it is and what it's actually going to do. I was a teacher for so long, and we worked fastidiously with our union to bargain for our benefits. And this would be very devastating to see this overridden. So, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mueller. Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Chair Baker. And thank you to the testifiers this morning from cities and townships and counties and hospitality, because I've been hearing from everybody on these concerns. And I guess our responsibility right now is to look at past an idea into implementation. And what are the effects for Minnesotans and their expectations for response time for critical access services, for caring for people in a hospital when you have a car accident, when you need to have a breast cancer surgery like I had and there's no time to wait? What are we going to do when we have a huge snowstorm and we have to have a path to get to services? How are we going to have public safety officers and sheriffs and police protect us when we are in our most vulnerable moment? who is going to care for the disability children and adults and seniors in group homes, nursing homes, assisted livings? I'm very concerned on 24-hour operations, the places we go when we're in the greatest risk. I'm also concerned about how it's going to work at a hotel, what's going to happen when you're getting married and you have a contract to serve 250 people, but you don't have anybody to serve the food. I mean, do you just cancel the wedding? Do you cancel the funeral? How are we going to function as a society in Minnesota and assure that we have to deal with the bargaining units that have been in place in the cities and the counties? And I think I appreciate the conversation this morning, because at the end of the day, it's what Minnesotans are going to experience. And there's many pieces to this layered onion that all need to be peeled back to have a complete understanding of what employees are going to be paying for a service and what services we may be without in Minnesota. So there's a lot of unknowns right now. Property taxes are a big concern across the state. I'm hearing about it every week and sometimes every day. Seniors are very concerned they're going to get priced out of their homes. Property taxes are definitely an issue that is a formula that, listening to this testimony, I don't know what the actuary studies look like for the counties and the cities and the school districts. I have no idea how that's going to look in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years for the combined thing. And I think Minnesotans want to know that answer too. And so two things can be true. We have an idea, but we also have an obligation to find the answers. And so today's been a very insightful day, and thank you. I have a lot of questions. I look forward to getting some of these numbers to see what the impact will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I wanted to see if Mr. Hilgard, Mr. Worth, and Mr. Moberg would be willing to go back to the testifiers table and for just some questions I have, especially in relationship to the business mandate that has been on the books for a year in Earn Sick and Safe Time. Each of you mentioned concerns in that regard and talked about how each of the different pieces to it have either been cost drivers or burdens or, frankly, really large challenges for your local government entities that have then had to pass on costs to local property taxpayers. So I wanted to see, based upon a year's worth of data and everything that has gone into the implementation of Earn Sick and Safe Time, if you can quantify, based upon maybe an average of the communities and municipalities that you represent, of the additional cost that it has been to, again, you can just use an average because I understand it might be different county to county, township to township. But if you were to quantify what that additional cost has been, that would be beneficial to the members of this committee.
Thank you, Representative Schultz. And as you make your question, make sure you say again for the record who you are so we know who's speaking. And to that question, I want to also remind members what we can do is bring on the local impact information that we have with our nonpartisan staff. That has been shared, and we can share that again. But again, I just want to make sure that those numbers have been looked at. And to the testifiers, go ahead and answer Representative Schultz's question. Mr. Hilbert.
Mr. Chair, Representative Schultz, thank you for the question. And I apologize because I won't have specific numbers. What I have more is anecdotal information. I can get that to you. We have an ability to do a little bit more specific numbering with the actual premium for paid leave because that's a little easier. We can take our payroll and we can multiply it by either 0.44% or 0.88%, as we talked about that dynamic of whether we're paying 50% or all of the premium. That's real. Those numbers range from anywhere from $80,000 per county all the way up to potentially $5 or $6 million or more per county. So that's a real impact. The Earn Sick and Safe Time implications, we have been starting to see that rollout take place. The effect of these can be different because depending on whether we're negotiating benefits to recognize especially that emergency responder, critical essential services to require folks to come in during a snowstorm, we might be giving something there. Now, what's the value of that benefit? Is it extra days off? Is it uniform allowances? Is it some kind of training professional material? Is it something on a COLA? Is it just another agreement on terms of employment? There's a cascade of different things that we might be trying to get to the point of which I think Representative Zalesnagar raised, which is we still need people to show up during these events. And I do want to be clear, we don't have the expectation that folks wouldn't show up. The public employees who are doing these works, they're public servants. We all know them in our communities. They're going to show up, right? But we've already seen some instances that cause us concern. And I think most folks, especially when we discuss this in nonpartisan framework, agree that certain core critical public functions, we should be able as employers to be able to schedule for those and make sure that we can accommodate the public's expectation that services are being delivered, that telecommunicators are answering 911 calls, that in Duluth, the plows are going to be running when we're having our snowstorms. That's what we're focused on. And we've already heard some folks when we talk about, hey, the legislature says these hours don't apply to you, but in order to really make sure, you have to sign this memorandum of understanding. And so, we've had some units go, of course, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We're essential workers. We have had some cases, though, where folks go, we're not going to sign that. And so that enters that period of we're going to have to be giving something or starting to negotiate over that. And that would be a cost. I don't have an Excel spreadsheet of those costs right now, or the cost of how we're booking the general 48 hours of ESST and the accumulation up to 80. But I can work on getting a response for you. I'm sorry if that was a little disjointed from your specific question, though.
Mr. Chair, Representative Owen Worth with the League of Minnesota Cities. I would echo the comments that Mr. Hilgert made. I don't have any exact numbers that would show the cost that Earned Sick and Safe Time or the anticipated cost that paid family medical leave premium would have on cities, but I can certainly confer with our HR the HR consultants that we have at the league to see if we have any information like that. But I would just say, it is to Mr. Hilgert's point, it's the potential impact on collective bargaining agreements now that these programs are taking effect. That 0.88% premium tax, what percent that the employer, we as public employers are going to be responsible for. The exact cost will vary obviously from city to city. We have cities that are members that are under 90 people in population. While that may be a very small overall cost with the number of public employees they have, those small cities would also face that would have a larger impact based on a smaller budget. So I don't have exact information that I could get to you, but I can follow up with our internal staff and see what we can get you.
Graham Berg-Moberg on behalf of the townships. I also do not have an exact number on that, and I do believe that getting one would be a little difficult for us specifically because, as Representative Mueller mentioned, a lot of our services are done on a contract basis. So if the plow guy comes to you and says it's costing 40% more this year, is that inflation? Is that he's having a hard time getting a hold of labor? Is it ESST? I will certainly look for such a number, but I think disaggregating it might be a little bit difficult.
Thank you. Anything else, Representative Schultz?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you to the testifiers, and I apologize in part for putting you on the spot, especially when you represent such, a vast array of sizes and scopes of employers in this instance. What I know from the conversations that I've had locally in my own community, in addition to talking to other job creators and employers across this state, and I think it's important for us to frame this up through the lens of Main Street small businesses across the state and employers across the board. We certainly know that townships and in some instances cities operate from that same exact vantage point of having 25 or fewer employees as an example. And in conversation recently, with a family small business operating in Main Street across the state. What I've heard is the cost to Earn Sick and Safe Time has equated to being a full salary of an additional employee. And when we think about that through the lens of local municipalities, and that was for a business of around 20 employees. And so, that could have ranged from anywhere from a $60,000 to $80,000 additional expense. And that's really heavy for, as you mentioned, for many local units of government. that then gets passed on to the property taxpayers. And if there's anything that I think all of us heard during the course of the last election cycle was that local property taxes is a major issue, and that's why these unfunded mandates are such a burden. And so I encourage you, to the extent at which you're able, to the extent at which data can be can help inform us, that we pursue that information so that we can make the best decisions possible. So thank you to each of you.
All right. Anything else, members? I have another question. Oh, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Thank you to everyone who testified. Very insightful. And my question is actually, you guys can sit back down. Sorry.
That's okay. Got Representative Baker. I've got one after this, so don't leave yet either.
So, Mr. Worth, I think it was you that brought up a couple different times about the impact on collective bargaining and the concern there. Could you just expand on what that impact is? And really kind of the root of my question is, are employees, could they be negatively impacted? So could they lose some of the things that they've gained through collective bargaining, or could you expand on that?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I would say that is not what we're anticipating with our employees. The state leave mandates are in addition to what has been collectively bargained. So that is where the concern is coming from our city employers, as they have negotiated these contracts with unions or had leave packages that they have offered to their employees if they're not represented by a union. And then with these new leave programs, they are all in addition to. So we haven't, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any cities that have rolled back their leave. This has all been, on top of what has been offered by cities. So does that answer your question?
Mr. Hilgard?
I would, want to make clear that we don't have the ability to roll back those programs. And just for examples of what do these programs look like? I know that we've testified in 2023 in front of both House and Senate committees. But for example, in Blue Earth, the average county employee already has 500 hours of PTO in addition to short-term disability programs. In St. Louis County, I used an example earlier, but in some of their collective bargaining agreements, they bargained a total accumulation period of 1,900 hours. 1,900 hours. That's a great benefit. That employee group said that that's really important for us. It transfers over to an FSA after retirement. Good for them. That's fantastic. And that employer and employee relationship was sound, and they came to those decisions together. But again, that we can't touch any of those hours or even require a utilization, even when these hours are for sick leave periods, and are well in excess of the state mandated program right now. Dakota County has combination of PTO and sick time comp hours of 1,000 hours cap. Polk County has 880 with an additional 350 of catastrophic leave. And of course, it's not uncommon for every single county to have catastrophic leave banks or banks where folks can contribute hours if there's something that folks don't have the banks for. So just some examples of what that means, those pre-existing benefits that you asked about.
Representative Bakeberg.
Just one more follow-up. Thank you for that clarification. So just background, my normal job, I'm a middle school principal, so I'm on the employee side of bargaining, just to be very transparent there. But so when we're negotiating, we're bargaining, there's an allocation really that goes to the school district in very simple terms. Do you see these types of program limiting the flexibility at the individual county, city, township level to be able to meet the needs of their employee group's desires?
Are you addressing it to anyone in particular, President Bakeberg?
Whoever thinks
that
that they would answer, and maybe if I'm one of the things that is important is to have the funding and the flexibility to be able to meet the local needs, because the needs of of one city is different than the needs of another city. The needs of one township is different than the needs of another township. So having and a couple of you have used the term one size fits all. So are you anticipating having less flexibility in the bargaining process?
Go ahead, anyone.
I think it's safe to say, Mr. Chair, Representative Bakenberg, that we would have less flexibility. And again, I appreciated Representative Schultz's comments and Representative Zalesnikar's about the pressures of property tax. Every single district, red, blue, at both sides of the aisle, are feeling those calls from their constituents about property tax impacts. And we have very limited means to change that, right? So for example, a county who has an 18% health insurance increase, right, from a private company that they contract with might represent an 8% levy, straight up. They don't have an option not to provide that health insurance coverage the following year. They can start to book out and ask for new bids, but that's going to take a year or two. Similar thing as if you kept county operations. If one county, it cost $1 million to create that operations, nothing changed. Inflation, cost, programming, mandates, state, federal funding, et cetera. But you had a 2% COLA, you're still having to address that in a levy the next year. So when you see your communities who are at 2 or 3% levy increases, it's not, oh, that's tremendous. I mean, it's amazing to me how they're keeping those costs still contained. What we're talking about with these HR systems is we've spent generations worth of levies, taxpayer resources to build up what we believe are very bona fide and sufficient benefit structures that are unique to each of these programs. And now we won't be able to touch them, change them without employee groups agreeing to that, even in the face of these new programs. So yes, to your question of does it mean that we have some rigidity or a lack of flexibility in this? I would say yes, that is true.
All right, any follow-up, Representative Bakeberg? Thank you. My question is to Mr. Worth. When it comes to our smallest cities in Minnesota, a lot of what's been talked about this morning has been agreed to with collective bargaining units and so on. But our small little cities of, let's say, 8 employees, just they got a couple maintenance guys or gals, they've got a couple clerks. Is every city in the state of Minnesota under a collective bargaining when it comes to those kind of really small cities? So are we giving them the credit, or we don't want to exclude them as an idea if they're also being included in some of these same other robust benefits that we've heard from maybe some larger cities or counties?
Mr. Chair, I would just have to, I'm not exactly familiar with, each individual city's collective bargaining situation, so I couldn't answer that question confidently right now, but I could certainly follow up with you on that.
I know as we move this conversation forward, we're going to have to understand the small little cities of the Atwaters and the, Norwood Young Americas, those small cities that we need to understand, is this what we should be working on? Because maybe they really do need this benefit as well. So that's just something I know we're going to need later on down the road. And I also just want to know, I don't see any other member questions at this point. We can kind of start ramping this down. A lot of our members in this committee have been doing some listening sessions kind of around the state, just very informally. I've invited members of this committee and the DFL members that were initially assigned to this committee to come. It's been open. We haven't had any of our other members make it yet, but I think everybody here has been to at least one of our meetings. We're going to, have one in Austin coming up in the future. We're looking at maybe northern Minnesota. What we're trying to get to is, what are some of the ideas that might work? Because again, as somebody here has mentioned earlier, what came from this idea method of providing these benefits is much different than putting it into law, because there is so many complexities about what we have here. Some of the ideas that we have seen is, again, let's maybe focus on the parental side of this leave. Maybe that's the area we can start focusing on. A private option. Let's look at an offering that we had last year for businesses and companies that can actually buy a short-term disability plan that covers parental leave at 100% pay for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever that company feels that they can afford to do. Let's give those options, but we need to make sure that as we listen around the state, we're going to bring those ideas here. We're going to sift them through. There's already a number of fiscal note requests that has been coming out for some ideas that will be coming in future bills that we'll be seeing in front of our committee. So we just encourage all members to bring those ideas here, because the way I see it, and I'm just one member of the 133 members that we have in the Minnesota House today is that we can't let this program roll out like it is without some more changes, without some more significant understandings of what this will cost our public entities, our large companies that were already offering these services. Now those employees are going to get a tax on a benefit they were already getting. Even if it was really close to what the state is offering, what a slap in the face to those employees that were already getting this benefit and now they have to pay for it. We're going to continue to listen to people this year. We're going to continue to look for ideas of what other states are doing. Some others are doing this in a hybrid model, some private, some mandated, and some public options. We're going to look at what works best in Minnesota, because Minnesota has a very complex business model here that has to work for our newest entrepreneurs to our largest Fortune 500 companies. And we've got to find a way to make it work. We know this isn't going to just go away. It's not going to get repealed, and we need to work with what we have. So I just wanted to maybe make sure that comment was there. Oh, Ms. Eng, okay. Yes, Ms. Eng, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, the Legislative Budget Office did a local impact note study on the original House file that passed for paid family medical leave. This was the House File 2 with the 0.7 premium amount. For cities, counties, schools, and townships, the 2026 premium amount estimated in the study was $106.8 million, and in 2027 it was $110.1 million.
And Ms. Eng, was that based on a 50-50 share, or was that 100% cost to the counties over that $100 million?
The table I'm looking at says total employer premium amount, so I think this assumed that it would be at the employer.
Got it. Thank you very much for that input. So, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the guys at the table, thank you. And I don't have any other questions for you, but I actually did have a question for, I think, Lauren or John would maybe be best served to answer the question if you have a moment. So speaking particularly to the lens of Main Street small businesses as they're working on earn sick and save time, one of the concerns that I've heard thus far is sometimes, especially based upon the size of the company and potentially not having HR departments, and they might only have part-time accounting staff, et cetera. They might even, that might even be contracted outside of their business. Looking into those instances from the information and the feedback that you've received from your members, are you seeing them use the setup that the state has designed, where they're actually accounting for every hour of earned time, or that they look at it through the whole and they're just like, I don't want the additional administrative expense. I'm just going to equate to what the total number of hours would be for my employees, and then just saying that's going to be the lump sum that I'm giving to my employees, just because it would be a lot easier for me to do it that way. I'm just kind of curious what feedback you're getting from small businesses.
Thank
Laura,
you,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Schultz, Lauren Schotthorst with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. It's a combination of both. The flexibility that you can accrue or you can front load is helpful, and businesses have to make that own decision. Accruing is more burdensome, but it does constrain the usage in a earn and use type model, whereas front loading, you lose sort of that control in instances where without the notification and things like that, you can utilize your time pretty quick up front and then leave employment for other opportunities, and you sort of have to take that risk. So I would say businesses have analyzed, as best they can, that decision. I would suspect that, I couldn't give an estimate, but half are going front loading and half might be going accrual method.
Mr. Borsche?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative Schultz, I would echo Lauren's comments. I'd say it's a combination of both, depending on the size of the business, their internal operations. Again, can't quantify an exact percentage of businesses that do it one way or the other, but definitely a combination of both, depending on the the nature of the business.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the conversations that I've had, some, because of that decision that each individual business gets to make, they even question, well, goodness, in this workforce environment, what's the best decision for us? And if we're choosing to track, choosing to accrue over time instead of the lump sum, is that going to create some level of fissure between what is traditionally a very much a team environment, and based upon that decision, are we just creating additional division that doesn't have to exist between business owner and operator and employees? And I just wanted to see if you have heard any additional feedback in that regard in this topic.
Ms. Schotthorst.
Mr. Chair, Representative Schultz, yes, we've actually seen that. In some instances, when bottom lines are very tight, employers are tracking very judiciously and making schedule adjustments accordingly to calibrate to the amount of time being earned so that that can be managed on time potentially being used. We actually are seeing instances where leave patterns are changing among employees, and practices amongst colleagues and the workplace are changing too. For example, we're hearing that certain Fridays are a utilization of sick and safe time in hunting season, or Mondays in fishing season. Certain crews that have high awareness of the mandate are suddenly using it at a rate more than they had done in the past. The notification requirements, where Hannah mentioned earlier, there's a practice to trade shifts or things like that. That's been seriously challenged because you cannot find your replacement, and situations where an employee would seek to do a shift change or things like that, not showing up at all or giving notification, which can lead to serious operational challenges like not being able to open a business until a replacement employee or the owner can get there to fulfill that role. Or in worst case scenarios, certain medications might not have been given to certain animals, for example, if an employee was not there to do that work. And so there's some tough situations that are occurring because of this. And it's not 100% employees are changing their use, but enough are that you should be very interested in looking at notification requirements and misuse in order to give employers some authority to manage the utilization of this benefit in a way that is reasonable for both sides.
Representative Schultz. Okay. Representative Mecklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe you could, as this paid family medical leave is coming out, rolling out, have you heard of any scenarios where if a company is already giving a greater amount of time off, PTO, what have you, where they're going to reduce that amount and say because we're mandated we have to give it over here, whether it's earned sick and safe or the paid family medical leave, where they're reducing the benefit that was previously given and/or to, which means now that the employee, especially under the paid family medical leave, is going to be paying for it, for something that they were already given. Have you heard of any scenarios of that nature?
Ms. Schotthorst.
Mr. Chair, Representative Mecklin, those are the conversations that employers across the state are having. So compensation packages are complex. They include wages and benefits, and there's only a certain piece of the pie that exists, and employers have to evaluate their cost obligations for the mandates now against what they were previously offered. And as costs go up for benefits broadly and wages broadly, you have to recalibrate that. So that's not a unique practice for employers to strategically look at their benefits plans and recalibrate them. It's putting more pressure on that. And yes, employers are making decisions. I can't say how many members have said we're doing this because of this, but we hear collectively from our members that this is all under consideration. They don't want to lower benefits that they had already figured out and offered their employees, but they might have to. So yes, it's on the table. It's being discussed. I can't give you a number as to how many have already done it.
Representative Mecklin? Mr. Beshe. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Representative Mecklin, the same situation stands for our members. You know, we have folks who will be looking at how they can offset these costs, whether that be change up additional benefits or different benefits that were previously offered to provide for these additional benefits and absorb these costs, or if it means increasing prices. I mean, it's a again, it's a business by business decision, but it's definitely conversations that our members are having.
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe our final member question today. Is there more? Representative Johnson. Final one.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I just want to make sure the message gets out. You're up here, and I think when you talk to your different companies and employers, there's not one of them that doesn't want the best for their employees. You know, they are looking out to make sure that their families are healthy and stuff, because a healthy employee makes a successful company. So what you're here today and why we're talking today is to make sure we come up with a plan and find the issues that are existing right now that people are seeing is going to make lives worse. You know, whether it's going to be more complicated, it's making, safety issues, it's making harder to hire. And I think we just want to make sure, I want to make sure, and I'm sure we all want to make sure that what we're trying to do is make sure this plan is going to actually provide the benefit people want to benefit and not create the harm that we're trying to unwind afterwards. And I think that's an important message, that every company out there is, only succeeds based on their employees. And the employees need to have safe situation, need to have happy families. They know, as an employer, I know if there's something going on at home, there's something going on at work. And those two have to combine together, and that's what our goal is today, to find a plan or find something that will work that this isn't there yet, that can create that win-win situation going forward. And I think I just felt that was important as we go forward. Thank you.
Well said, Representative Johnson. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's first official meeting of the Workforce Labor Committee. Again, we'll have more conversations. Again, I look forward to having our DFL members here because I want to hear what their priorities are too. There are always things we learn from each other and our own districts and their districts, because we are state representatives that have to work together to make the state of Minnesota better and work better. So again, I just want to say thank you to everybody for attending today, the testifiers, the testimony. We are going to be hearing a lot more this coming session. I also just want to say that, again, this was our first official meeting. We do have a quorum today, so this will be entered into the log. Our agenda for next week, our next meeting is Tuesday at 8:15 here in the same room. We don't have our agenda just quite set yet. I'm going to be hoping to reach over to see if other members will be here in attendance. I'm hoping to hear from them very soon. Otherwise, we'll move forward as we have done this week. So members, with that, we have concluded our business for today. We are adjourned.